I've got a bonus episode for you today. I wanted to kind of get topical on something with Tim McMurray, former athletic director at Texas A&M Commerce. You now know that school as East Texas A&M. Helped transition them from D2 to D1 as athletic director. He is now the VP of Game 1 of collegiate sales. And look, Tim hooked me up with some shirts to wear on the show. And so during that phone call that we had, I said, "Hey, tell me about uniform patches and sponsorships from your side of things. What does it actually look like from that side? How difficult is it?" I think it's something I can share with the deputies and the athletic directors that watch Higher Ed Athletics. And so I asked him to come on the show, and so we're going to talk about this. Now, look, he rose through the ranks in D1 throughout his whole career as a senior level administrator at Maryland, SMU, Northern Illinois, Texas State, and Lamar, and then obviously got into the AD chair. And so I think he brings a different perspective. And anyone that watches or listens to the show, I try to ask almost everyone about uniform patches right now. And so then I want to also just use this as a chance to kind of go in depth a little bit about what a contract actually looks like in case someone's watching this that maybe that's not your responsibility right now. And Game 1 is an interesting business since they can give you Adidas, Nike, and Under Armour. So I thought that this could reach a big audience, and I just wanted to have Tim on. And so that's where you get a bonus episode this week. Next week, we'll be back with another AD or Deputy AD interview. Thanks for watching Higher Ed Athletics. Come for these topics of uniform patches and contracts. Stay for the advice of a former athletic director that now sees things from a different 30,000 foot view because he's talking to athletic directors across the country every day. I want to kind of get to uniform patches because this is all the rage right now. You mentioned private equity, which is definitely a talking point. The more of like, on the field, off the field, on the field, but this we will see on the field or uniform patches. And we're starting to see schools announce this. I try to ask every AD, at least every other AD on the podcast, like, what's your approach to this? They all seem to have different answers, but the theme I'm taking is not very many people have rolled it out, and it's kind of a wait and see approach. And some people are, wrapping it with, maybe all sports or football and basketball or however they're going to do it based on institutional fit. I'm kind of curious from your side of things as an apparel company and provider. How does this affect your kind of line of work, if at all? Because obviously everything has to be in a certain size, but like whether you're doing it with any of your three brands too. I mean, how are the brands feeling about this, like the companies, and then how does it affect your job?
There probably is not a more timely question you could ask me, and I'll give you a quick anecdotal story tied to this. I did an interview at the NCAA convention this past winter in January. I got asked about the jersey patch question, very similar to what you just did, and I gave an answer. I said, I don't think it's if, I think it's when, um, and it could happen as early as tomorrow. And then that was the day they tabled it. And then I'm getting off of a flight in early January, not even 2 weeks after convention, or late January, not even 2 weeks after convention. And I had text messages from four sitting Division One ADs, a couple FCS ADs, a couple of deputies. I'm like, man, what just happened? Something happened. And a couple of texts just said, what do you think this means? What does this mean for our uniform ordering? I went, and so I quickly looked up on social. Sure enough, the NCAA did pass it after tabling it not just 2 weeks before. It's a timely question because, from our perspective as a dealer, it creates some decorating logistics, but we're used to, whether it's bowl patches or nameplates or that type of thing. We decorate uniforms for schools all the time. Some schools order blank and have their own decorating local relationship. We run those hybrid models in conjunction with them. So we're kind of used to that piece. You tell us what to do, what we can do legally, and we work with the school's licensing. That we have a full time licensing person at Game One as well that works with CLC and Affinity and all the other collegiate licensing companies. But From the dealer perspective, it's not as much of a hot potato because I'll tell you, because it's still unfolding right now. Each of the brands have either or in the process of rolling out here over the next few days and weeks their official stance on it. Um, and this is where I have to put on where I've seen, again, direct from the brand side, certainly being now on the dealer side, and then the top of the pyramid, I see the AD because if I'm the brand, hey, we give you that, we provide that jersey, that uniform, that travel suit, that coach's shirt, whatever, at a discount, and we give you promotional allotment to help you, with the contract. So we don't want anything spatting or tarnishing our brand. We're already a sponsor, so that should our logo on there should count. Now I also see the AD side where once I buy real estate, you don't if you've sold me the real estate, you don't tell me where to build a house
No
or
HOA fee, right?
yeah, no HOA fee. You don't, yeah. And so now being on the dealer side, we do have that responsibility. I've actually, with our sitting D1 partners about a month ago, just to gather some talking points to be prepared for brand conversations. We did them back to back to back. We did an FBS partners account or a Teams call. We did a partners forum. We did FCS the next hour, and then we did Division I non-football. And we had anywhere from 8 to 15 schools on each one of them with great questions. And they asked, hey, can we bring our senior, our deputy? The only thing at the time we didn't allow were the multimedia rights holders because we wanted ADs to be able to have, their own think tank, confidential conversation. It gave me some opportunities to take back questions to our brand partners and to be able to share with them kind of, hey, here's what we're hearing out there, and it was very productive. We've had some follow up. There are now with uniforms are starting to hit here within the next couple of weeks. So decoration is about to start. Some schools have signed practice jersey agreements. Some have signed in-game uniform agreements already. Some are still hanging back waiting. So it's a unique it's a unique opportunity. It's a unique time in the space right now, and I don't think I very much hope. And I said this to a brand, one of our brand partners last week, and I said it to several schools. The last thing any of us want is more litigation in collegiate athletics right now. So let's find, some happy mediums. The NCAA gave the very specific, 2x2, up to 2 logos, nothing in postseason. I personally think the postseason thing is going to get solved this summer, before it even starts, because that would be a nightmare to have a jersey patch all year and then have to take it off. And I can tell you there could be an equipment manager organized riot in Indianapolis if that happened. So I think there's still a lot of things to work out. It's absolutely a hot button issue that we at Game One are helping our partners navigate and monitor.
Say it every time. I partner with onrise.care because I care about college athletes. I spent 10 years working in athletic academic support. I know how much importance you have to place on mental health. Think about all the pressures our athletes are facing. Coming out of high school, adjusting to college is enough stress for anybody. Now all of a sudden you throw in the transfer portal. You throw in even more expectations. Just the concern of being an athlete, in season, out of season, making friends, making connections, finishing that degree, staying eligible, actually performing in your sport. All of these are everyday concerns for college athletes. I know you care about your college athletes too. Some of you listening, your department may not be able to afford the support. So that's why I partner with OnRise, to make sure you're aware that you can have one call, same day setup, immediate athlete access to licensed clinicians, retired pros, and 24/7 crisis care. it's going to be very affordable for you, less than what you would spend on one full-time employee in-house. No hiring hassles, no initiative fatigue. And let me just say, the passion Kim has for this business is why you have to go to onrise.care. Tell them that Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you. Check out their website and see why you can start providing access to mental health for your athletes, because I know how much you care about them. The extent of what I know about this type of work is when I was in high school, the TV show Friday Night Lights, not the movie, but the TV show got
Yeah,
popular. And all
yeah,
of a sudden, the East Dillon Panthers
yeah.
needed some new uniforms. And, I think they got brand new Under Armour helmets and uniforms in like 48 hours in the locker room. And then the rep told the coach, Taylor, that he wrote him a personal check and said, "Coach, I need to have something to take back to Baltimore." And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's is how it works. As far as like snap your fingers and this high school is getting their brand new equipment and here's a personal check, and then I'm going to go back to the national headquarters of Under Armour. It was just kind of, but that was like my extent of it. And I was like, I was in high school at the time. I was like, I don't think that's how this works when I was rewatching it like a year ago. So you're telling me it's a little more complicated than TV.
It's quite a bit more, and I know that all three of our brand part Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, we would love for it to be that quick or that easy and all that. But there's certainly legal, but and because TV, I like to say, just like anything that's obviously fiction, and certainly Friday Night Lights, being living here in Texas, being a Texas native, there is some truth in the fiction from that show and the movie. But in terms of that, the primary reason it can't happen is because, especially with well, whether you're a state school or a private institution, there's legal and procurement. And we're certainly in a competitive market. There's two national team dealers, us and our three-letter competitor that's been around a lot longer. But we are the fastest growing collegiate dealer in the country, having added 165 new partners, or servicing over 165 new partners, and approximately 65 of those coming on in the last 18 to 24 months. I was pretty fortunate even before I came over, now just finishing up my fourth year at Game One, to be involved in all different collegiate apparel contracts, and whether it was direct model with some of my Power Four experience, whether it was a team dealer model with some schools, and now also seeing it from the AD chair. So bringing that triangular approach to Game One helps me have these conversations that maybe some others don't have the benefit of being able to do. The way that it happens, any school that's not in what's called an ASD, an all school deal, or ASP, all school partnership, is really probably leaving resources on the table. Everybody has an opportunity in an all school deal to benefit their department with resources, and that typically comes in the form of when we sign a contract and we work with the school on a partnership, and we're very intentional about just not being a vendor contract. We want to truly be a partner as a team dealer. We're very intentional about how we build it out, whether it's, we work with all three major brands, Adidas, Nike, and Under Armour, and whether it's the discount structure, the amount of promotional dollars, the amount of rebate based on certain spend of other hard goods outside of your cloth and footwear, how you may want to set up e-commerce and team stores. We even do dabble in the NIL space and revenue share space a little bit, depending on the size of the contract. But we really do at all three levels of NCAA competition and our NAIA partners. So there are several factors that go into the contract. It starts really with what is that historical spend, and then that allows us as the dealer to work with the brand, build out what a proposal can look like. We'll talk about discounts if you're paying. When we say spend, that means actual cash spent on apparel, footwear, equipment. In recent history, and normally, a lot of times we can look, depending on how many sports are offered by a school. we can eyeball it pretty well, but we always like to confirm the data with the school so we don't way overshoot or put in a spend number where they can't hit it. And then that off of that, then like I said, there's some pretty standard pricing models and rebates. And then we also will give them what's called promotional allotment to complement that spend. So promotional allotment is essentially like a gift card at MSRP. So that's
Yeah.
the short that's the short primer of how a contract works. Maybe it wasn't that short, but thirty
No, I'm
thousand.
I'm kind of curious. Say someone's contract, like how far out do you all look to
Yeah,
or recommend for like a deputy AD that might be like, hey, you're going to be helping me with this, this
yeah.
next negotiation or this the contract's up and we're sending out maybe feelers for other providers. Like how far out of a contract ending do people need to actually start preparing these for?
Yeah, another great question. We always like to say with our ordering, and a lot of times, especially with our Division One and maybe some larger Division Two partners that want to guarantee inventory access and get their orders in, we typically in October, November for the fall, we've done team bookings already for fall of 26. So just like we work, you know, 9 to in some cases 12 months in advance on booking with current partners, right now we're already in conversations working on 2020 summer 2027 new contracts, extensions, and starting to have the conversations with any 28s that may be expiring. So definitely at least a year in advance, because when I talk to ads, typically ones that maybe I have a relationship with. I was on the phone with a couple of them on Friday advising them if that contract's up, summer of 27, you don't want to go too deep into the fall without knowing what direction you're going, because especially it could be any number of factors, whether it's a brand flip or an extension. You don't want to be exposed when it comes time to book. So typically we're on 15 to 18 month for sure, staying ahead of it. 18 months is generally our base.
Another week of higher ed athletics and another partnership announcement with AD Vantage. People are finally figuring out why I partnered with them, why Tanner Stump and his team have created the money ball of college athletic departments. Clemson, Louisville, Charlotte, Boise State, Coastal Carolina, North Texas, Missouri State, and Indiana State have all made the decision to partner with AD Vantage. So when you zoom out across the industry, there's definitely no shortage of data, but there is a lack of context with that data. You can see what programs are spending, but not always what they're getting in return. So AD Vantage, they start to connect those dots for you. It's not another expense line. It's a smarter way to deploy the ones you already have. I read you the list of partners. There's probably going to be another one soon. Why not you? Your competitors probably have already talked to them. College athletics is a decision sport. Make the right one and contact AD Vantage. Tell them Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you. Yeah, and you do. You also, I mean, obviously, you know what's going on with those deals, and you know the pressure points that you talked about. You also know what kind of pressures and other things they're dealing with by being able to relate to them. What are you kind of feeling like? I always wonder if athletic directors are still having fun in their jobs, but like say in the last like 6 months of your travels, I mean, going back to maybe to football season and the fall sports, are they liking their jobs? What kind of pressures are athletic directors, really across the board feeling right now?
I do. I think it's a funny question, because I do somewhat jokingly say I do have former colleagues or friends that will say, "Hey, do you miss it? Like, do you miss it?" And I say, "Well, I don't miss it, but because I've really got a special opportunity here." Now, I'll give you an example of why I don't miss it, and I'll share a little bit personal story. The other thing that, in addition to in 2021, 22, when Commerce announced, when we made the announcement we were moving to Division One, I had a few personal things that happened that helped give me some perspective in the space. I lost my parents. My dad was 74, my mom was 76. They passed away a year and 3 days apart from each other, with one with dementia, one with Alzheimer's. That happened during the pandemic. Um, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer during the pandemic, so we had 7 procedures there, and 5 years August cancer free, hand to God. But when things like that happen, um, Travis, I learned being an athletic director is what I do. It's not who I am, and that personal piece. That's not a to look for any kind of sympathy. It's a message for, especially if you're, whether you're a sitting AD listening to this or an administrator that's aspiring to be one. It's very hard, or it's very easy to lose perspective in this because, oh, hey, there's the AD or there's the deputy AD. Well, I have a name, right? I have a proper name, and so it allowed me to gave Vicky and I through a lot of prayer and reflection. And I came home in March of 22. Both our basketball teams, and you know how D2 regionals work. Our men's and women's basketball team both got beat back-to-back nights in regionals, and that was our last year in Division Two. And I came home and said to Vicky, for personal and professional reasons, for the first time in 31 years, the last 9 months have felt like a job, not a vocation. And just to say that was very cathartic. I believe where God guides, He provides. The very next day, I was having lunch with Ronnie Flowers. He was the owner. He's one of our 5 legacy owners. Game One's the product of 8 regional companies that were bought by private equity, where they saw an opportunity to build a second national team dealer in the space back in 2020. And sharing with Ronnie what I was sharing with Ronnie what the conversation the night before. They were our Athletic Supply was our team dealer at A&M Commerce, so had some relationships there. Well, Chris Wieldy, who's now my boss, our executive VP for business development, Chris called me that same day, and as we started talking about what something may look like, because they didn't have, our model is we have a lot of former successful coaches, equipment operations, that maybe have been, or salespeople from another discipline that are very good in our space as our reps and our regional managers. But we've never had that person that has actually done the contract work, knew the campus procurement side, knew how to kind of align and assemble all the players. And that was a big part of how the conversation started. And, within about 3 weeks, Chris was taking Vicky and I to dinner off site, and it really transitioned well, and was a huge blessing for me. So as I get that question, I do think there is burnout, and I'll say this. Let me think about this. I spent some time in March. The AD ranges of people I spent time with were 33 to 65 probably. And I think the answer can be a little bit different with that, because it's very interesting. Some of the ADs that are closer to the end and the beginning of the career, that they don't want to make decisions that handicap the next person coming behind them, just for a selfish revenue gain, or whether it's obviously private equity is a buzzword right now, or taking a gift from a unique donor gift that may come with, or sponsor element that may come with some unique ties to get a splash in rev share. And then the younger generation, they're still, and I saw Jamie Boggs the other day wrote a great little reflection on, they're still students. We still have an obligation, if you're committed, to help them get that degree. Now, it is a little confusing. It is a little mushy with the portal. I do think those things will resolve themselves. I mean, I said the other day on a panel where I was speaking that in 1979, you thought college football was going to blow up and never be the same when the CFA broke off and did their own TV contract. Well, now, I mean, coming off of this year, depending on whose ratings and reviews and end of year stats, college football has never been more popular. College basketball, even without the number of Cinderellas this year, had some record Sweet 16 and Final Four ratings. So it's going to work out. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's legislatively driven in Washington. I don't know if it's collective bargaining mandated or agreed upon, but this has been around. This profession has been around a lot longer than anybody that's in it right now, and I have a lot of optimism. It's going to stay. Now, I like. I really love what I get to do. Back to the one of the original pieces of your question, because um, close friend, one of neighbors. She's a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company. If I were in that line of work, that would be a job, and it would be, you know, lucrative and great and all that. But I would have no problem leaving it at, 5:03, because I still get to go to events, because I'm still engaged with ADs and conference offices, and in some cases more so even than, when you're in the AD chair, you have to focus on your campus. I like to focus on our current 160 whatever partners, 163 partners as of this taping, and the other 34 that we're in discussions with right now. So I feel like there's in a different way. There's definitely a scoreboard still, and I enjoy the competitive juices that this side of the profession allows.
So, any parting advice for someone that's now been on both sides of this topic, as the AD and then the person trying to convince the AD that Game One is the right company for their needs? But I'm just kind of curious. Like, you have offered a different perspective that I think when I have an AD or a deputy AD on to bring advice. What advice would you share for the kind of the up and comer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I was, as I mentioned, I was very fortunate to have great professional mentors. So the five or six things that I've taken away in my career is, when you first get that, whether you get that first AD job or you're in the chair and you're moving and there's so many competing priorities, and you hear about the famous first 90 or 100-day plan. You come in there, left lane, hammer down. I know I did, and then I pretty quickly realized you can't boil the ocean in the first 3 months. So, and I actually heard Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark say this last week. It was a piece of advice he took: let the cake bake. And that, if you're fortunate and you're listening to this to get that senior deputy opportunity, make sure you balance your enthusiasm, your initiative, your plan, but make sure you let the cake bake. Uh, One of my favorite ones, John Wooden: be quick but don't hurry. I think that applies on campus more than anywhere. You can do everything on your side, but there's still that 21-day procurement wait on an RFP, or that contract review that's illegal. Be quick, but don't hurry. I think, and this is certainly true uh, in the team dealer line now, being competitive on that side, but throughout college athletics, pressure is a privilege. It's not something that you should ever back away from. If pressure bothers you, um, it might be time to go look for that comfortable 8 to 5 job, hour for lunch, leave it at work, don't pick it back up until 8 a.m. And that lifestyle is okay. One of my very best personal friends has that lifestyle. His wife has a very successful career. That's what he does, and he's okay with that. But pressure is a privilege in what we do, because there's literally and sometimes metaphorically a scoreboard. And then when you fail, fail fast. Get over it. My boss loves to quote Bill Belichick when we do lose an apparel deal, and he says, "On to Cincinnati," because that's kind of one of Belichick's famous quotes. And then just the other one, the kind of final one I would say is, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's a perspective one for me, and it's helped me be, And when I used to hire coaches and administrators, they'd ask me what I'm looking for in that position. And before we talked about the technical parts of the job, I would say, look, just join me and be hungry, humble, hustle, and smart, because we can control those four things every day. And that was instilled in me by some great mentors that I had. Didn't get a chance to mention Steve Orsini and Rick Hart at SMU, Jim and Jeff Comfort at NIU, and then certainly working for three presidents in my first 3 years of commerce. Could be a whole other podcast. but very, very fortunate to have great mentors like those guys that helped shape me.
So would I get you in trouble if I asked you what you think of the new name of the school?
No, not at all.
What do you think of the rebrand?
I thought they've done a tremendous job with it. I think in my opinion, it should have been East Texas A&M all along because it aligns with West Texas A&M. So you have the East West. It aligns with, it's the bookend directionals. Um, so I thought that commerce that the challenging thing about A&M Commerce was I remember sometimes I'd get the question, "Now, is that the business school? Or is that the business school at A&M? Or it East Texas A&M one it allows them to do a much better job of telling the story of where they are, where they came from, and now what you've done when they changed the name from East Texas State and joined the A&M system, you took ET out of it. So now that you've got ET back in the name, it's been a great option. I was talking to Jim Curry about this at the Final Four a couple of weeks ago, more than that now, 3 weeks ago. But it has allowed them a chance to re-engage and really tell the ET story, reinvigorate the ET story. So yeah, I thought it was a
Well,
great move.
well, I'm going on taking Hired Athletics on a road trip to Texas, and I would have not had any idea where Commerce was had they not changed it to East Texas because I'm going to East Texas, so maybe I gotta go that way. So Tim, thanks so much for coming on
That'd be
Hired Athletics. I knew from talking to you, months ago about uniforms and apparel deals that you could bring some great insights to the audience, and then it also works out that you've also been an AD, and obviously this is a very niche audience of those that want to be in that role. And I've been pretty adamant that people need to think maybe not just about what the whether it's a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 behind the letter D. Find a place that fits you and that you can have a lifestyle that that you and if you have a family that you can serve them. So just thanks for coming on Hired Athletics. It's been fun to talk.
Really appreciate it, Travis. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Bloom where you're planted.